Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast, where we create space for conversations that heal. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure, a nationally certified school psychologist. I, along with our special guests, will give you insight to promote collective healing by putting people first. Through weekly conversations with educators, psychologists, and healers, we'll discuss ways to heal, thrive, and live your best life. This is the Healing Center Conversations podcast. Welcome to the Healing Center Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Byron McClure. And look, y'all, we have a super dope guest in the virtual building today, Claudine Miles. How are you?
I'm so well and so excited to be here. This feels like old times with old friends and just excited to share and catch up.
Yeah. And I want to jump right into the conversation. And, you know, I know there's so much that's going on in the world. Like, I just want to check in with you. Like, how are you for real?
Most days, okay. The last 2 or 3 weeks have been really challenging. Just personally dealing with different things, parenting, still being in a pandemic, health challenges for my immediate family. But I think this season, if nothing else, has strengthened our collective resilience. And so I know it's just a season and like personally things will brighten up, but professionally things are going great. So it allows me to find a balance in both areas and spaces.
Yeah, and we got to find that balance. You're all about restoring more, and we're going to talk all things being restorative here, but we got to start with that check-in, with that opening round first. And so we have that Hampton connection. Shout out Hampton, Onyx 7, 2008. And so I want you to take us on a journey, right? So you graduate Hampton. Fill us in on what happens after Hampton 2008. What do you do? Where do you go? What happens? Fill us in.
I guess I have to rewind just a little bit to like probably last semester of senior year. It was 2008. A recession had just kind of popped off. People were not finding jobs. And one thing about me, I knew going home was not an option. My mother made it very clear, I love you, but you can't come back here. It's time to fly the coop, leave the nest. I was already 20 hours away from home, being a Rhode Island native. And I was like, there's no clear path backwards. We're only going forward. And when I saw people weren't getting jobs, I just started to think strategically. I had been substituting for the last year and a half in Hampton City schools while I was still going to college. And I fell in love with it. And that led me to applying to Teach for America. And as the universe had it, another HU alum, BK, and I went to William and Mary and did this day-long interview with TFA, and we got it. And we were like, this is amazing. Fast forward, I get placed in Atlanta at an amazing charter school led by an amazing, phenomenal Black principal. Her name was Kimberly Karakalides. And I just credit her to a lot of my early growth and development. I've always had amazing mentors and leaders, and I was really privileged. And then I just spent the next decade at that same exact school. For me, Teach for America was just a stepping stone, and I was never of the mindset of I'm going to do my 2-year commitment and be out. It was always like, this is my community, this is my extended family, this is my home away from home, and I want to fall in, learn, and then support. And so in that journey of being there a decade, I was the 6th grade science teacher and a grade level chair, created the Founding Gifted program, because what many people have been taught to believe is that schools that are 100% Black don't have a high gifted population, when in reality, what we found out after testing was it was 30% of our population. But those kids weren't getting serviced. And so built out that entire program at the school, which then became like a region-wide initiative. So hundreds of kids in KIT Metro Atlanta got access to the services they needed to be able to grow their brains and just level up with their skill set. And then my last role within that placement was actually the Dean of Restorative Practices, and just fell in love with that work. It was funny because at first I was resistant. I was like, what is this? I don't want to do this. What is this? And then I was like, oh, this is just who I am. Now I see why my boss thought this would be a good idea. He knew what he was talking about. And as luck would have it, it ended up being the catalyst for me stepping out of this traditional schoolhouse role and launching my own business. And Restore More is an organization that helps schools build capacity with restorative practices, anti-racism, and social emotional learning. So I took the best parts of my job, dropped the rest, and now I get to travel the country doing that, and I love it.
Yeah, and I want to dive into Restore More, what you're doing, the amazing things you've been able to do. But let's back up a little bit, and I want you to dive deeper. And was there a moment where across that decade, that 10-year span, where you were like, you know what, I've done everything that I can possibly do. Now it's time for me to transition out and build up my own thing? Was there a pivotal moment for you?
Absolutely. I think when you talk to most entrepreneurs, there's always a pivotal moment. And like my pivotal moment story is ugly and messy, but I think it's what enables me to help others start their restoration journey. I was struggling with burnout. I was an assistant principal for 6 years. I was working 70 to 80 hours a week. I had a company cell phone that kids could call as early as 7 a.m. and as late as 9 p.m. I had lovely parents who often would call after 9 p.m. because they needed support, because they wanted help, because we had built amazing relationships. My phone often rang as early as 4:30 a.m. to tell me about bus outages. I had to start problem solving, literally, like as soon as you wake up or you're woken up to problems, right? And it sharpened my saw in that the typical problem, whether it be an active shooter outside, whether it be a student was taken from the grounds, whether it be shooting in the neighborhood, not much disturbs my spirit in the moment of chaos. I get really calm, I get really solutions oriented, and my only thought is how do I protect my kids and my staff? And so like it lent itself to that lifestyle. But eventually I just realized I didn't have much to give, and having a child will really help you realize that. It was very easy to ignore when I wasn't taking care of myself, because I was like, wow, I love these kids in this community, I'm gonna show up for them first. But when I had a baby, you can't half care for an infant. It requires full, constant care, as you know, dad of 3, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So it's sad to say, but having him made me fight for me. And it made me step back and realize he just deserved a better version of me, because the version he was getting was dropping him off when it was dark at daycare. And picking him up when it was dark. And it literally was like a movie. He had the classroom that was like had the big window facing the driveway. So I'd pull up in the dark. He'd literally be on there. You could see him mouthing mommy. I was like, what kind of horror movie is this? And it just became really apparent. And I remember going home at Thanksgiving in 2017, and I cried to my mom. And I said, Mom, I know you immigrated to this country at 9, and you made college accessible for me, and you've given me so much that you didn't have. And I know this was like the end goal, but I'm so unhappy. And she was like, this ain't the end goal. You don't need to stay there and be miserable. And I almost needed that permission at I was probably like 29 when I had my son. I needed to hear that, because I was so bound up in this first generation narrative of what it was supposed to look like. And that was it. I was free after that. I went back to work, and I let them know, like, incredibly respectfully, here's where I'm at mentally, here's where I'm at emotionally, here's what's happening to my family, here's what I'm going to do. I want to give you more than enough time to find someone. So literally spoke to my boss in November and said, what can I do to, support the transition? How can I help the next person? Like, whatever I can do to make sure that this space is left intact and doesn't feel the loss of that absence, I want to do. And spent that next 6-7 months building, saving, stacking, and dreaming, and haven't really looked back.
Yeah, let's talk about that dream a little bit, acknowledging the path that led you to that dream. You are absolutely right. Having a child will put things into perspective. And I love the fact that you talked to your mom and she gave you that permission to feel all the things, which is super, super dope. All of that propelled you towards this dream, Restore More. Talk about this dream a little bit, the inspiration behind it, and how you went on making that transition out of the schools and into Restore More.
I feel like when you are in chaos and constant stress, you don't dream. It's hard to dream. It's hard to dream when you're constantly dealing with trauma, or when the trauma of others, that secondary trauma, triggers you, right? And I feel like once I made my peace with this is what the future looks like for me, I started dreaming again, both literally and metaphorically. Literally, I would go to sleep and actually have dreams and remember them, because for years I could not recall my dreams. And when I did have them, they were about school, right? But I can't pinpoint the exact moment, when this idea came to me. But it literally was as instantaneous as I try to think back on it. And I just decided, like, I want to take the parts of my job that I love and build something. For years, I've had peers and colleagues transition into educational consulting, and I didn't understand what they were doing. I didn't understand how they built that business model out, but I knew I could do it. I knew I had an amazing skill set with what I knew, and I love to learn. So I would figure out the business stuff, and I knew I needed someone who believed in it and someone that would help me. And so, like, when I had this very loose form vision, like no name, no logo, just I want to do what we're doing here in this school, right? Transitioning the school from highly punitive to restorative. I want to be able to do that everywhere, because ultimately I do it to decrease and eradicate the school to prison pipeline. That's an issue that matters deeply to me. And so how do we help schools do this work, particularly for Black and brown children? And so I went to my best friend, my colleague, the godmother of my baby, and I said, hey, I have this idea. I want to build something. I don't really know all the parts. I know I want it to be largely restorative based, but I need someone to rock with me. And I don't know why, like, we always laugh and joke about it, but she had blind faith. Steve Jobs said he probably wouldn't have started Apple if he didn't have Wozniak by his side. Wozniak was his right-hand man who was often in the shadows, but was integral in the growth of Apple. And he talks about needing that person, that second person. It's often referred to as entrepreneurs as your first fan. And Kim was my first fan. She just believed in it. And then we started, like, taking it all seriously. We started meeting at coffee shops every Sunday, making up stuff. And when it was time for me to leave, it was the spring of 2018. Every day after that was literally like, you're going to get up, you're going to sit somewhere, and you're going to attempt to focus on this thing that you're trying to get out from here and, like, onto paper and then share with others. You're going to focus on it every single day. And some days, Byron, I didn't know what I was supposed to do. But that's the beauty of having, like, time and space to do it. And it's a privilege. I want to be really clear. Like, not everyone has that luxury, but I was fortunate enough to have the time to dream. I was in a mentally clear enough space to be able to dream. And from that, I started putting it on paper and building it. And Kim has really helped me organize some of the thinking.
And that's your co-founder, correct?
That is my co-founder. She is our chief operations officer, and she is all things like branding, design, aesthetics. She takes the ideas from my head. She makes them pretty and clear for other people.
Yeah. And we all need that person. Brian, my twin, he's that person who I'll have these big ideas, big dreams. And he's like, okay, what's the practical aspect of this? Let's bring it in. And what can you actually start doing? So how did you and Kim take these ideas, the plans you all were putting onto paper in coffee shops, and how did you take the ideas and put it into an actual practical plan? And then how did y'all execute?
Yeah. So, as corny as it sounds, we made a business plan. You know,
I was going to ask, was it a business plan?
Yes. Now, remember, I'm completely novice. I know nothing about business. I know what I know about education. I'm an expert in my field. But when it comes to building a successful business, very ignorant. So I started just immersing myself in ways to learn, whether that was signing up for workshops and webinars of successful entrepreneurs, or applying for fellowships, or reading, or listening to podcasts. When I say I was very focused on gaining knowledge at a rapid rate, because I needed to learn what I didn't know. I even did this exercise where I drew a stick figure of, like, where I was currently and my, like, positive traits, and then where I wanted to be as an entrepreneur and the traits I would need to possess. And it was a major mismatch. Like, an entrepreneur needs to be in these streets networking. I wasn't going nowhere to network. I was right in the house, comfortable, because I was still in, like, teacher, school leader mindset, right? My free time is my free time. Whereas as an entrepreneur, it's very different. And so in understanding those gaps, we quickly realized we need a solid business plan to flesh out our ideas. We downloaded one from Google for free. We put it on paper. But having it on paper and having the right questions posed to us that we didn't know to ask of ourselves helped us to think about, what's the model? How do we make money? How do we scale? When we do reach a critical mass, what do we do? Who would need to be the next hire, right? Just those critical questions that if you are new to business, you're not considering because you just don't know. And then from there, we tried probably, like, every wrong method to attract clients, right? And I think enough folks don't talk about the mistakes. So I love sharing this mistake because it's just so truly our story. I remember thinking, I'm gonna get into all the schools in Georgia because I'm a research beast. So I literally researched every single school in Georgia, made a beautiful Excel sheet, found every principal and assistant principal and school counselor.
And got the emails, got all the
emails, emailed them all. I was like, oh wait, this is about to go off. We're about to be booked and busy. Guess how many responses I got?
Less than
0.
5.
No,
Whoa.
0.
Whoa.
But in retrospect, it makes so much sense. It was completely blind marketing. I didn't understand the missions of those schools. I didn't understand if they would be interested in this work. What I've learned since then is it's so important to understand your target customer. I know exactly who's going to purchase from us now. It's often Title I principals. They are often Black and brown women or incredibly woke white folk. They're already into restorative practices, SEL, and anti-racism. They've been doing the work. They want the support. They work with Black and brown babies, and they recognize they may not always be best positioned, and representation matters. They specifically look for firms like mine. See how quickly and easily I was able to articulate who my leader is? They're also typically 35 to 45. They love Netflix. They binge. They often shop at Whole Foods because they're trying to be health conscious, but often don't do well with self-care because they're overworked and burnt out. Right. So now that I better understand my target market, I'm not out here blindly emailing principals or blindly marketing. I have a lot more strategy, and that's come with knowledge. That's come with making mistakes. But I want to answer your question about how I made it super practical. Number one, I got a business coach. It was very clear. Your girl didn't know what she was doing in business. And I think it's important to advocate for all stages of individuals in the entrepreneurship field to get a coach. Your person that you admire out in the world that's doing similar work to you, they probably have a coach. And so I was like, I'm going to get me a coach. And started working with an amazing talent named Jimmy Starnes. And he was like, whoa, let's scale this strategy back, sis. We're not emailing everyone. Find 3 principals that know the quality of your work. Pitch to them. Offer them a discounted rate. Kill it. Give them your best. Document every single step. Those become your testimonials. You ask them for referrals. You grow. And it was just like, all the doors were unlocked. I literally went to my old bosses, my old colleagues that had over time transitioned into leadership. And when I say it suddenly became easy, because it was, sales is all about relationships. So it was leveraging the relationship I had to articulate my skill set could help them solve a problem that they had. And once I figured that out, we've been smooth rolling.
Yeah. So let's talk about this a little bit more. You're finally, and I love how you made it practical. And once you made it practical, it became easy. It didn't feel forced. And so now you're at a point to where you're building relationships, you're inside of schools. I want you to talk a little bit about why restorative practices, though. You mentioned you took some of the best parts of your job. There were many parts of your job, but why restorative practices?
I feel, well, let me adjust that. I know that particularly throughout this country that is steeped in racism through and through, that Black and brown students disproportionately are affected by discipline. That discipline is often given through a biased lens. And we know that because when we look at the data, Black students are getting in trouble for the same infractions at 3 or 4 times the rate of their white peers. The issue that this creates is ultimately if a student gets continuous suspensions, we know they're more likely to drop out of high school. Like one suspension doubles the risk of high school dropout rates, right? And oftentimes these students are quickly ushered to resource officers, which introduce them to the juvenile justice system. I genuinely believe there's a lot of trauma within our communities that goes unheard, that continues to be unhealed. And until we heal the heart, we can't reach the mind. And so I am a firm believer that our kids need to know that we are there for them, that we love them, and that they are loved. And I think restorative practices creates a very practical approach and framework for teachers to do that. It's not a script, right? But it is a set of ideals that guides who we can become as educators. And I want to be the best version of myself as an educator. And I've tried various different approaches to discipline. This one has always fit me the best, feels the most authentic, and more importantly than beyond me, I've seen it have the most impact on students that look like me, that have experienced trauma.
So let's talk about that impact for a little bit. And, I'm a huge proponent of restorative practices, been doing it for a while in DC. And, similar to you, I've seen the positive impact. I know the positive impact it can have and that it has had. There's always going to be haters out there in the world. And haters from academia, researchers, all of those things, and people who will say that there's not a strong enough evidence base, it's fluff. What's your response to those critics of restorative practices?
I guess I would first say, have you seen it in action? Because I think it's very easy to find articles that speak to the contrary of anything, right? Particularly in this season of fake news assault. But I think about the experiences and those anecdotal moments that I've seen with kids. I also know that at the school I worked at, we dropped our suspension rate by 27% in 1 year. So like, yes, the anecdotal stories for me are most important, but numbers don't lie. So I have my own data. I also have data from every school that I worked with and seeing the impact on teachers. I also want folks to understand this particular framework makes the work more sustainable for educators. I think about the days where I used to yell or try to discipline through fear or power and how exhausted and burnt out it made me. And then I think about, when I learned this new skill set, everything felt easier, and the students were often doing the cognitive lift needed to repair the harm or fix the situation or make it right. And I was a lot less stressed because we put the problem back on the young people. And we get frustrated with young people sometimes. They make really bad choices, but when do we give them a chance to actually solve it? When do we give them a chance to sit in it and figure it out? Or are we so quick to run and solve it for them and do all of the work and then wonder why they haven't developed in this area? So for me, it's about really developing the whole student. And when you go into schools that are doing this work well and consistently, you see it. So I think about one of my young boys who had a situation at home with his mom where he got into it with her and he bucked on her, which, if you know, in a Black household, that's considered a huge sign of disrespect. You don't buck at your mama. And he literally came to me a morning of school in tears saying, "I need a circle, Miss Miles. It's an emergency." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, maybe there's a fight that's going to pop off. Tell me what's going on." And it had nothing to do with school. But this student recognized this way of communication is really effective. I have conflict at home. I don't necessarily know how to solve it because my mama won't talk to me right now. And she keeps shooting me dagger eyes like she could cut me. But this method can work. And so reached out to mom, spoke to her, did the restorative prep, walked through the experience with her, and she was willing to come in. And when I say by the end of the circle, we were all in tears, mom and son were hugging, she definitely was able to still give him feedback of you were out of pocket, you can never do that again, unacceptable, but I forgive you and I love you. And I think people don't often realize the impact that utilizing restorative practices not only has on a school, but families and communities, because every time we're doing repair harm circles, we're inviting in parents of both parties. I've invited in pastors and coaches and whomever else is connected to my baby that they value. And that builds something fundamentally different in a school than you're suspended, call someone to pick you up.
That's a fact. And I think so many people lose sight of that, or they're just ignorant to the fact of the impact of the entire community. And we all know maybe some of us don't know, but the community building aspect of restorative practices that are just so deep and powerful. And just being honest, in some of our communities, it's so drastically different. Like when I worked in DC, people were used to a certain way of responding in conflict that had just become the norm. And using this approach is we don't have to respond that way. And so there was a lot of teaching. Here's another option, and it can restore more. And when we do this approach, it's this powerful transformative shift that can happen. So yeah, absolutely right. What's even interesting, last night, my son, I do all of these things, not just in schools, but in my family with my kids too. And my son was like, we need to have a restorative circle. I'm like, wait a minute. We need to have a what?
You caused harm.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that though, because it just reminded me of an experience I had with a student, right? We had just started rolling out restorative practices, literally year one initiative. And he gets upset easily, very easily triggered, highly emotional, bald fist, huffing and puffing, oftentimes hitting lockers when he would get upset over minor incidents. And pulled him to my office and I said, "Okay, we're going to talk." "I don't want to talk, Miss Miles. Just suspend me." So understanding that sometimes conditioning is deep. And the reason we started this initiative at my school was because so many of our kids were fighting. That was how they handled their conflict. Oh, you said something? Boom.
Let's fight.
Oh, you dropped that comment on social media? Boom. Oh, you looked at me funny? Boom. So we implemented it as a response to these behaviors that were really concerning for us. And what it created was a pathway for students to actually have constructive communication about conflict, which isn't always a skill that young people master. But if they can, before they left us in 8th grade, how powerful.
Yo, that is a fact. Yo, our stories are so similar. Our work like overlaps so much. I think we all have that story where we have a group of students who are like, yo, I'm about to fight. I don't care. Just suspend me. It's easier. That's what we've been doing. And that's been the response. Like, you do this, zero tolerance, you're out of here. And they know that. But this is how I am going to convey like my needs. Like, we come in like, no, like there's a different way how we can approach it. And it takes time. And I'm sure like you've experienced the same frustration I've had, where the pace of change is so long to where I've had circles where conflict has popped off and it's been fights in the middle of it. And I'm like, yo, this not getting it. But when you stick with it, over time, now students are like, Doc, like we got to have a restorative circle. Like we have this process, staff are asking for it. And so it can really be transformative. So
I feel like we opened Pandora's box, because one of the things I wasn't expecting was like parents to start requesting circles or staff. And I was like, oh, I thought these were for kids. But you're right. The community in general broadly starts to recognize, oh, this is probably better than me gossiping about this person or harboring this feeling from something that happened when we were co-teaching. But I had plenty of adult-only circles that did not involve any kids. So it was really impactful.
That's a fact. So, Claudine, I want to shift gears a little bit. And one of the things that I love about Restore More, you all are constantly putting out positive messages. You all have a large presence on social media, and on the Restore More Instagram page, you all have a post that is just so encouraging, and it says, self-doubt will have you giving up before you try. Bet on you. Your winning season is coming. I would love for you to break this post down. Break this down fast.
I feel like when I saw it, because it is not my original work, but when I saw it, I was just instantly like, it just spoke to me, because I was in the space for many years where self-doubt didn't even allow me to dream. Again, as a first generation college student, I'm having parents who immigrated to this country. There's so many restrictions placed on your life before you even start, right? All the statistics telling you what you can't do, what you're meant to do, who you should be. And I just remember when I left out of the schoolhouse that I was just going to bet on me. And that was really hard because it meant a lot of sacrifice. So I was making a very great salary, the most I had ever made. And I stepped out on blind faith, like a 6-month savings and a dream. And so it meant like literally looking at my finances saying, what do I need to cut? Particularly at a point in my life where I was very comfortable. And it meant a lot of sacrifice, but I was not willing to give up until I saw the progress. And I think people fail to understand what that means. So when the 6 months dried up of my reserve, how hard was I willing to go for my dream? I had a very clear conversation with my husband. I'm not going back into a school. I believe in this too much. So how much you need me to contribute to this household? We agreed on a number. And I was like, oh, I could do that driving Lyft for 2 to 3 hours a day. Why did I do that? Because I needed the rest of the time to build my business. I didn't need to be plugged into a school. I didn't need to be somewhere where I was given 10 to 12 hours of my intellectual capacity so that I go home drained. I needed to be able to just squeak through enough to take care of a few things that lighten the load. So again, when I say bet on you, it also means be willing to sacrifice while you're betting on you and just not giving up. And one of the things I know that I continue to do this day that really does guide me is I listen to motivational speakers every morning. Because I think people often assume like, oh, how do you get all that stuff done? You're so motivated. No, I'm not. Some days I wake up and I want to lay in the bed. Today was one. Yesterday was one. Day before. Like, I don't want to do much. For real, for real. So when I don't have that internal motivation, I think about where I can get it from. And sometimes listening to an Eric Thomas, a Dwayne Dwyer, I'm blanking on her last name right now, but Nikki, I don't want to say it wrong. But there are several folks that I listen to that give me that extra push I need, particularly at a time where I was doubting myself. So sometimes you need folks to pour into you. And that was just one way I kind of created like this cheat code. Like every morning I'm going to have someone in my ear yelling at me, telling me I am great. And then I can do wild things if I just don't quit. And Eric Thomas is great for that.
Oh, he'll get you right.
Man, after that, I was like, I'm a lion. I eat gazelles. Okay, if you listen to Eric Thomas, you get that. If you don't, you absolutely think I'm crazy. But I'm cool with it. But when I say betting on you, I was not willing to stop until I saw it actualized. And I don't even know what that milestone was. But once I got the first 3 schools, I was like, oh, you can't tell me. Now, I'm not making what I used to make, but I'll get there.
Yeah, I want to dive into this a little bit because so many people who are inside of schools, and I want to focus on educators for a little bit, who might be thinking about transitioning out. And then a lot of social media entrepreneurs, they think that you can just like be an entrepreneur, that is glitz and glamour. The reality is it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of sacrifice. It takes dedication. And one of the things that you said that I don't want people to miss, you had a 6-month reserve that allowed you a cushion, a little bit of time to try to get things in order. Can you talk about the mindset of having that 6-month reserve, just from a business standpoint, from a family standpoint, of why you needed that 6-month reserve?
Yeah, I'm a very planful and intentional person. And so I told you I went home on Thanksgiving and I was like, okay, I know moving forward, I'm not coming back. I was able then to start adjusting my budget. And again, just to be very practical, I cut cable. I cut all unnecessary expenses. It was really funny because I remember being really nervous to go to my husband and be like, we got to get rid of ESPN and all the sports packages. I'm sorry. And he was just so graceful and supportive. But we literally looked at our financials and said, what can we cut that feels like extra fluff? And then every month I was taking a significant portion of my check because now I have less bills and I will spend less, and I put it away. Having that allowed me the space to breathe. Again, when you are financially strapped and steeped in trauma, you cannot be creative. They don't go together. Financial stress or any type of stress will literally suck your creativity out of your soul because that becomes the primary focus. And so I needed to know that while there would be sacrifices that needed to be made, I didn't want it to burden my family to the point where their quality of life was diminished. Like, we had a home, we had 2 cars, like those things needed to stay intact. My son was in a daycare that cost money. Like, those things needed to stay intact. And so when we got really clear on what was most important and what wasn't, we started building for our next steps. If I had the chance to do it again, I would say for a year. So I could have avoided having to do the lift. But again, I was not above sacrificing. And for some people, that's a lot of ego. It's really challenging them for them to, have this job that maybe comes with a lot of perceived status and prestige, and then like go into an industry where it's really service-based. But when I say I have no shame in my game, all money is good money if it's honest money, and I will do anything, especially where I was then. I was so committed to seeing this brand grow, and I was like, I'll do anything to get there. And I think sometimes it's like that willingness, like the universe almost sees the pure intention, and it's like, let's reward that. We see that, let's reward that. So when I say sometimes things have literally fallen in my lap, I think it's because of that groundwork. So if you're thinking about it, start saving, start looking at your finances, start planning, start building relationships and inroads with folks that you may have. Like, just be very strategic.
Yeah. And Claudine, I would love for you to talk a little bit about once Restore More got to a place where you all could sustain and where you can like have a life, you can, okay, like we're making good headway. How did you then scale your business model?
Such a great question. I think one of the things that I try to be very focused on are my numbers, right? Knowing what my monthly in is, what my monthly out is, what my profit margin is. Am I ultimately pricing my services and products in a way that allows me to do good work, but also sustain the vision that I have for this organization? And so that means referring back to your own work and tweaking it, aka raising your prices when appropriate, yes. Right? I think particularly oftentimes entrepreneurs feel like, well, I gotta have this low price to start. And oftentimes in the market, that just reads as it's not as quality.
Yes.
So it's taking time to build out your price point, your services, making sure you are like clearly articulate to your potential partner or client, here's the value you get with this. Like, yeah, you're going to pay this, but you get boom, 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 boom. Like, really making sure that that part is clear has allowed me to feel unashamed and unapologetic about raising my price. I also try to be very diligent about saving our money and reinvesting it back into the business, right? So at any given point, I'm going to have 6 figures in our bank account. But at any given point, I'm going to take 20% of that and be reinvesting it back into the business. So, when we first started, I was doing everything myself. Like Kim was still working full time and we weren't in a place financially for her to leave and transition over because we didn't have enough funds to pay ourselves, right? But once we got to that point and we were able to do that, it was like, okay, now what can we invest in? We can hire a digital marketing strategist to really build out not only our social media, but making sure that it's funneled through our email, through our website, that it's consistent, that it's targeted. We can hire an assistant to help us with all of the things that are overwhelming us that we can do, but we shouldn't do because it's not the best use of our time, and more important things are falling as a result. We recently just brought on a lead facilitator because we've got 30 facilitators around the country that support us in doing this work, and it's a lot to manage all of those lovely contracted individuals, and I want them to have a wonderful experience when they engage with us as well. So a dedicated person to head up that particular department is important, and so each time we grow, I am always thinking ahead about what's the next thing we need to level up, from staff to just general like equipment, business cards. We do a lot of public speaking. So recently I invested in like high quality mic packs because sometimes I go to a place and they got great mics and then sometimes they have none. And then I'm yelling because I'm in a mask. So again, just thinking about how with every return, how do you take a percentage of that and build up what you currently have?
And that's so important, because some people will think, especially as they're starting out, that that's all your money. And people will get that misconstrued. And I love the fact how you talk about you have to reinvest back into the company. And what that does, it allows you to continue growing, continue scaling the work that you're doing as well, to the point where you said you have 30 facilitators now.
Yeah.
Dope. So I want to shift a little bit. Part of what you've been able to do is around advocacy work. And you recently had 2 policies that have been implemented across all of Atlanta.
Yes, Atlanta Public Schools.
Atlanta Public Schools. I'd love for you to talk about what those 2 policies were and how you went about getting, involved in that policy component.
So the 2 policies that got passed in Atlanta Public Schools were one on restorative practices and one on trauma-informed care, basically stating that these are 2 initiatives that the district will roll out, which impacts 53,000 kids. I close my eyes when I say it because it's a dream and it's just so beautiful. And it really just started with giving a damn and talking to others who gave a damn.
Let's go. Listen. Okay, like we not just gonna blow by that, right?
No.
Can you let's compare that, right? I want to compare that. When you were inside of the school system, how many kids were you working with as a dean?
350 a year.
350 a year. You just had a sweeping policy that impacted how many?
53,000 kids.
Yo, come on now.
It was all a dream.
It was all a dream.
Literally.
But that's huge.
Yeah, and I got to give credit because I had never been an organizer. I have never proclaimed to be an activist. But when I look back actually over the series of my life, I'm like, yo, you've been doing this stuff. In 8th grade in my hometown, a Black off-duty police officer was killed when he went to intervene at a robbery, and 2 white officers shot him, even though he repeatedly declared, I am a police officer. I was in 8th grade and I started a whole petition in the city. Like, I've always kind of been this way, but I wasn't able to always tie it together. In middle school, we didn't have safe places to go and hang out. We went to the park and we were often faced with police discrimination, from harassment to macing to sometimes taking you on rides and beating folks up in alleys. And I was like, we need a safe place to hang out. And I started this foundation with my friends called Youth Place. And we got a $50,000 grant. And we used to open Monday through Friday to come kick it after school and play basketball, do homework. And then once a month we would have parties that we like sold out and made like $2,000-$3,000 in middle school. So when I reflect back, I'm like, you was playing with yourself. You've been playing with yourself. For real. Because of self-doubt.
You said it. Bet on you. What?
So like one of my best friends was like, yo, this been you. It's you. Been sleeping on you. Like, do you remember who you are? And I'm like, oh, no, I guess I did forget. So I say all of this to say, it started with just people giving a damn. I got connected with an amazing organization called LEE, Leaders for Educational Equity. As an as a Teach for America alum, you're actually like automatically entered into this organization, but you know how to deal goals. When you're like plugged into schools, you're not paying attention to sometimes all the other things. But when I left the schools, I realized these networks were going to be important. I tapped back into Lee. I went to Houston for 3 days and I got training in civic organizing in the same way Dr. King did it. He did it through a strategy called house meetings. He would go into the homes of individuals and he would sit down and talk to them about racism. And he would find common ground, and then he would give them very small bite-sized action steps. We took the same model, went to Atlanta, and I started hosting house meetings at venues saying, hey, if you give a damn about the school to prison pipeline, pull up on me. And they did. Teachers, parents, lawyers, judges, doctors, because what we forget is so many professionals see this system and they realize how unjust it is and they actually do care. And then we started tweeting the school board members because, you know, it was like, hey, there's 50 of us right now at this restaurant. We're all talking about the school to prison pipeline. Want to talk? We care a lot about it. And it was that for months. Like we had 6 house meetings, 1 every month, and we just kept at it. One day, someone from the board hit me back and was like, hey, I see you. I really am concerned about this issue too. Let's work together. Next thing I know, I was at the very fancy board table in Atlanta Public Schools and we were talking, and Lee is so well connected. They were like, we have 2 policy writers that can help you envision the policy you want. And me and this amazing board member, Erica Mitchell, sat down and dreamed up what it should entail. These amazing policy writers wrote it. And then we advocated like all get out to the board to get it passed. And it worked. So I say it really humbly and still shocked, because if we strategically organize, you'd be so surprised what we can get done. And that's what Dr. King figured out, but it works.
It works and it's possible and you are doing the work. So I would love to hear, with all the things you've been able to do, all the things you're doing, the future where Restore More is headed. I really want to know, what does being healing centered mean to you?
It's the core of what we do. Our vision statement is helping people to be their healthiest selves. Like at the core of it, I want people to be emotionally intact and restored to be their best selves. And you don't do that without centering healing. And you don't do that without taking a healing journey. And I would not be this version of me if I did not heal from my experience with burnout, if I did not heal from my experience with childhood trauma, if I didn't confront the things that were keeping me small, I could never be big. So healing centered is at the core of the work that we do. And I love the name.
Yeah. This conversation has been so fulfilling. I guess it's been restoring everything that I have. I would love to know if you have any future projects coming up, any big initiatives. What's next for Restore More?
Man, everything.
Yeah.
I'm manifesting international clients this year. So really trying to work with anyone in the Caribbean. So if you are a school in those areas and you are looking to continue to grow in your areas of restorative practices, anti-racism, teacher wellness, or social emotional learning, get at us. We would love to come and support your school. Additionally, we recently landed an amazing partnership with the New York Department of Education. So that's really exciting, supporting them in their social emotional learning initiatives. And then continuing to grow and get into more schools nationally. I think 2 things that we have coming up that like individuals can look forward to is like, if you are a entrepreneur who's been in it for a season and are ready to like level up, scale, and grow to a 6-figure revenue point, we're going to be launching a pre-recorded masterclass on that. My team, as well as the amazing ladies over at the K. Allen Consulting Firms, partnered about 8 months ago to do that workshop live, and it was incredibly rich. And so we've put it together in a video content format so folks can go through it independently. But again, if you are someone who has been consistent, who has, a couple handfuls of clients, but you are really eager to get to that next space and want to focus on scaling and growing, I would highly encourage you to get it. It is quality, but it's also robust in that we're going to give you all the tools, the templates. It specifically focuses on hiring, scaling and the operations you need to scale. And when I say we give you everything, like here are the interview questions to ask. Here's a sample contract. Here are things you need to be mindful of in terms of branding and scaling. And so it's really, really rich. I encourage folks to check that out. And then a new project that I am so excited about is we're getting ready to launch our restoration journal in the next 60 days. And it is a 30-day journal to guide individuals through healing. It's what I wish I had when I was at my lowest. I want you to envision it as that private coach that helps you go from like, I'm broken to I'm restored. And it's filled with affirmations, journaling prompts, a self-care plan, meal tracking, like just all the facets of wellness have been embedded into this tool. So I'm really excited to launch that soon.
Yeah, and there is so much thought, so much energy, so much good intentions that's going into everything that you're doing. And there's no option for it but to be successful, because it's good intentions and just dope work that's behind it. So any closing thoughts you want to share?
One, I'm just honored to be in this space. I'm incredibly proud of you. We shared at the top of this that we both went to Hampton, but you know, when you're in school, you never know what's going to come of the things and the people. And it's just beautiful to see you out here doing your work as a Black man, being a leader in your field. And I tell you this often, but I want to make sure I give you your flowers here. I don't think you understand how often I credit and speak to your work. Last night, I did a parent session on social emotional learning, particularly self-management. And in those sessions, we're breaking down with parents, how do we build this skill set at home? Let's drill into this SEL competency and put it in basic language, make it plain. Here are games you can do. Here are activities you can do. And every time I lead those sessions with parents, I always play your videos to break down these convoluted terms for my audience, but also to share a resource with them to say, you don't have to be the expert in this. Look at this amazing man. He the expert in this. Yeah. He literally is trained in this, degreed, mastered, okay? He looked like us. He went to an HBCU. Wait. Watch the intentionality in his videos. They look like us. They sound like us. He be laying down dope hip hop beats in the background, and yes, I notice, okay? Yes, I notice. I see.
Let's talk about it, yeah.
And then there's always questions that are geared towards students, so a parent could put that on in the morning on a ride to school and have a good social emotional learning conversation in 10 minutes or less. And what you offer makes what is highly academic and research-based digestible for kids and adults, and I think it's brilliant. And so I will continue to share your work. I hope it continues to bear fruit for you, and I am just so proud of what you are building and what you are growing. It is amazing, and I will continue to support you anytime you ring my bell.
Thank you. That's much appreciated. And I just love the of course the Hampton connection, but like you said, the work that you're doing, that we're in similar spaces and that we can lean on, you know, with the dope stuff that we both bring to the table. We don't have to be experts in everything, but if we're experts in relationships, then we can leverage the relationships and networking of one another. And we could thrive together, you know. So collaboration. How can people get in touch with you on social media or your website?
Yeah, super easy. You can follow us on social media. Instagram is probably where we get the most busy, and it's at We Restore More. No special spellings, no hyphenations, at We Restore More. And our website is the same thing, www.werestoremore.com. But if you head to our IG, you could book a free consultation with us. You can get access to any of our circle kits that we sell, which make having restorative circles in your classroom easy. You could take an online course on how to get more comfortable with circles. So we have a ton of tools for folks to interact with us, even if they can't necessarily get us into their school. And I never wanted that to be a barrier, folks. So if you're hearing today and you like what you hear and you're interested in this, be a bridge. Connect us to your school leader, your AP, your counselor. We would love to come and work with you. And if there's a troll on that bridge gatekeeping, know that we got some stuff for y'all anyway. So we would love your follow, your support. And just looking forward to collaborating with all the new folks that are on the other side of this listening.
Let's get it, y'all. Go blow her up. Make sure you follow, make sure you show support. She's doing sensational work, uplifting students. Her impact is being felt across the nation. So to our listeners, thanks for tuning in to this episode. Claudine, once again, thank you for this healing centered conversations. Until next time, take care, everyone.